episode 11 and you still don't have a ceremonial mug? It's time to get with it. Metal Base Monday. So a couple orders of business on the show and on the channel, and then we'll get into it. First up, I wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who's jumped on board and decided to do the program that I spoke about last week. I put it out as something to kind of keep everybody going and maybe something for the shut-in period and everything. And I've really been kind of knocked back by the response to it, and it's been really, really cool getting to meet some of you and working with you on playing and on developing and things like that. And just, being able to put faces with the comments and really meeting all the other metal bassists, because I really do view this channel not as much a channel of like me just talking to people, but kind of a community thing. And I learn as much and get an understanding of what's going on with metal bass by talking with everybody out there as I do by doing the shows and the gear demos and all that type of stuff. So it's been really, really cool. And yeah, I've just been impressed and psyched, and thank you so much. And on that note, as far as it being a community, I genuinely mean that. And on a regular basis, I'm going to, just like I have in other episodes and things, I'm going to be asking for your input. I want to make this a real growing channel and a community and everything, but I want to make sure that I'm incorporating what people really want to see and how they feel about how the channel's being designed and what's going on with it as it grows. And again, as I said last episode, there's a lot coming up, so you're going to see increased output coming up real soon again. One of the things that I'm always trying to do, of course, is get the channel to grow. So you may see some changes here and there, approaches to thumbnails, trying, different things just to get a presence out there, and you just have to throw things against the wall and see what sticks. One thing that I can promise that you're not going to see here, though, is a lot of the gimmick things. You're not going to see a bunch of hyper-fast edits that are seizure-inducing kind of things. Again, if that's what works for some channels or something, I'm not, leaping all over somebody's thing. That for amusement purposes or whatever it is, I'm not making a judgment call. But that's just not what it's about here. It's just not my general vibe. Some humor, yeah, why not? But a lot of the more obnoxious type of things, I want to kind of stay away from that, but I am going to try some other formats and things. So if you guys have things that you would like to see or different types of formats, always be ready to hit me in the comments. And I do read every single thing that comes in, and I try and respond to everybody because that's a big part of why the channel's here. So as I'm trying them, always feel free to say, hey, I dig this, maybe not that. Have you thought of this? I'm always appreciative, and I always enjoy it. Want this to be about us and not about me and clickbait and a bunch of garbage that especially, is just going to be a waste of time, because I'd rather get to exactly what is going to help everybody out and be a cool channel and get there as quick as possible. So thanks for being along for the ride. And on that note, let's get to topic one. Some of you know because you've watched it, but if you haven't, card up there, I was doing a show called Metal Base Microscope, and I tried to dive deep on players I thought were in need of an analysis and somebody to really kind of take it apart and explain what they do, from their approach to songwriting, to their playing, to their sound, and just kind of look at their history and really go in depth to find out what pieces of gold we could mine out of these important players' history, and maybe bring some to your attention that you hadn't thought of or hadn't realized their importance. They're definitely still in the works. I actually have a couple of them filmed. The biggest problem that I'm having is issues with copyright. And as you may know or may not know, whenever you use even a tiny bit of pre-recorded sound, which I try and put in there to show important pieces where this player has stepped forward or give the musical example, anytime you hear me do that, I get a copyright attack on the channel. So One thing that they can do is they'll go after the monetization, which means you'll see commercials and things running, but I don't have any choice in that, and they take the money that's gained from it. So I could do a 2 hour show, and if I use one 10-second clip of a song to show you the bass line of it, they take all that ad revenue. I really don't care. Sure, it'd be cool to have, but if anybody thinks, especially at this level, I'm getting rich off ad revenue, then I'll just put it this way. Thank you so much for the cup of coffee at the end of the month, ad revenue. I'm really not getting anything as far as that goes. But along with it, though, is it creates a catalog of consistent copyright hits. And that concerns me because I have seen some people get their channels taken down because they did a cover, which I've done a couple, because they put some music into something, they get their videos taken down. The truly rough part is if you get a copyright strike, which means they actually do a takedown of the video, or they come after your channel for it, and they may just delete your whole channel. I've seen it happen. So I try and be very measured and release them, a bit more sparsely than I do. I'd like to pick it up. But so here's my question to you. I'm going to start putting them out again. I'm going to try, seeing how it goes, and hopefully it doesn't get me too heavily deranked. But if I were to announce them during Metal Base Monday and then put them on a different platform where those things wouldn't be an issue, would that be something you'd follow, where you would go to a different platform to be able to go and see these things? And then I could supply them with all the music that I want to put in it, and we don't have to worry about it, and it's just over there. Not sure which platform I would pick. There's a number of them, but I'm open to that too. What other video platforms do you follow, if any? Let me know. And again, I'm looking into some alternatives, but I really did enjoy doing that, and I'd like to start publishing them again, especially some really extensive ones that I think are going to be really great for everybody to see, where I'm really going to get deep with a couple players that I think are important and actually play their parts and dissect them. So let me know down in the comments, and let's hit number 2. Yes, and at the end of this segment, I'm going to give you the secret to one of the most sought-after bass sounds in rock and metal history, and you're going to get it, and easy, and on the cheap. And just to kind of drive this point home. When we talked about it last week, we talked about gear and trends and spending a lot of money on things and finding your own sound. And the second part of this that I really wanted to drive home is, whether we want to admit it or not, a lot of us fall victim to brand name influence. Everybody wants to have that Cadillac of whatever it is at the moment, brand bass or guitar or amp or things like that. And it really, really can be punishing, especially in this format, because it has nothing to do with your sound. It really is a name tag. It's not like having a pair of jeans that are the right thing, or, having the Jordans, or, whatever it is. This thing literally shapes your sound, and it's hard not to fall victim to it. But I'm going to give you some examples of some things and show how straying away from that can, one, cost you a ton of money, two, show you to stop following the herd. Really, I have to emphasize it again. A lot of these online forums full of these cork-sniffing, I'm sure there's a ton of really nasty words I could use for them, gear snobs that just want to, parade around their $1,000 upon $1,000 rigs and all this other stuff. They're not telling you the truth. And you really can get fantastic results from a lot of things that they probably tell you are garbage, or it's outdated, or it's not hi-fi enough, or it's not this. Follow your ears, not your eyes. We play an audio-based art form. Do blind tests with gear as often as you can, things like that. But to emphasize this, I'm going to put up a Spotify playlist, link down below. Follow me on there if you haven't already. Again, I'm going to start putting up playlists of influential players or things to point out, and just generally cool songs that have some kind of great thing for bass to tune into. But anyway, on that note, realizing some players who had fantastic tones that I think helped give birth to or push the sound of some other players forward, they weren't that expensive. And one great example that I'm going to use is Peter Baltus from Accept. If you go back and look at the gear he was using, even in the 80s, it was considered bargain basement stuff. He had a tone on especially Balls to the Wall album that was fantastic. You can hear this really thick, punchy growling, and kind of had an early kind of clangish tone to it, just a little bit on the edge. I could almost draw a direct line between Peter Baltus and later on Frank Bellows' sound, especially on things like Among the Living, things like that. Bellows' sound is a bit more on the upper mids. He's got a bit more clank coming into it, but Baltus was right in that park. And when you look at the setup, you realize how much he did with stuff that today would be considered, how dare you go with something that cheap and that simple. And even back then, Peter Baltus back then was using a Fender Squier, their entry-level bass, a precision version with only one P pickup in it, and he had an EMG pickup in it. That's it. Bolt-on, no boutique stuff, no any of this. And again, I'm not putting down these instruments. I'm just saying buy it because it's what you need, not because you feel like you have to have it and you're being gear shamed. But again, it was beat to hell. I mean, the thing looked like he had put it through a wood chipper. Look at some of these pictures of the guy. And then he used all PV amps. PV has always, even though their reputation really took a leap when they got the 5150 and things like that, before then especially, they were considered the garage band special. They were what you bought because you had to, not because of what you wanted to. They were the gear you had on the way up. They were serviceable and a good workhorse and stuff, but they were never thought of as like, hey, I'm playing a festival somewhere in, Germany, or I've got, 100,000 people. I want to have PV gear behind me. That wasn't what they were looked at as. It was bargain basement, very blue collar working man type of gear. And he used to have a wall of that stuff behind him. So he's using what's considered not top of the line gear, even though he could definitely afford it at that time. And he used a main bass that was Fender's lowest, that was considered like, what you buy kids in high school. And he just put an EMG in it, and the dude's sound killed. Seriously, again, check out the playlist. You look at songs like London Leather Boys, listen to Balls to the Wall. He's got this great grinding, really, perfect marriage between low end and a good warm overdrive and just enough bite to cut through a really classic metal bass tone. And you could probably have everything that guy had if you looked around on some kind of used gear lot or here, like LA or something, Craigslist. You probably buy his entire gear set for about $250 at this point. So I say that to say all of this doesn't matter so much if you're going after what you hear. So often it can be had for so much less if you're willing to not be a gear snob and not go through all this other crap. Now, a big secret. One of, at least my favorite, and it had a huge influence on me, one of the best sounds that a lot of bass players really go after and really enjoyed was the early sound of Eddie Jackson from Queensryche. Eddie was really well known for playing his Spectre, and I think he influenced a lot of early metal players to play Spectres. You listen to his sound in that era on Operation Mindcrime, songs like I Don't Believe in Love, Anarchy X. You listen to Empire, Thin Line, Jet City Woman. He's just got a fantastic, a lot of gain, but warmth and aggression, a huge sound out of it. He used to play GK heads and things like that, and he used them a lot live. I saw them open for Metallica on that tour, and flat out, they destroyed Metallica. Watching them play was like listening to their CD really loud. It was perfectly clear. It was amazing. Absolutely stellar. Their performances were dead on perfect, but the bass sound just cut all night. I was blown away by it. Really kind of shocked me that early on. And I noticed, and it didn't register with me, but I noticed later that I didn't really see amps on stage with those guys, even back then. That was unheard of back then. And I was really curious about this, and I always wondered what was going on with that. Later on, from a sound man for that tour, I found out what they were actually using for the bass sound. Ready for this one? It's a piece of gear you would probably kick off a bridge if you ran into it today. The first series rack mount Bass Pod Pro. That's right. That massive sound came from one of these units that today is thought of as not hi-fi enough. It's not articulate enough. Nobody would really want to touch this thing anymore. I have one sitting in the rack right in front of me. I'll show it on a studio swivel here at some point. But that's amazing. I mean, you can find this again used at this point because people can't get rid of them fast enough for probably $50 or $60. And it gets you that sound. I've done it. I'll even tell you which ones I could pull it out of. If you go to the Bass Pod Pro and use the Amp 360 and use the 18 cabinet, make sure you dial in a good bit of that gain, tune the mids just right. All you need is a good bass with an EMG P&J set in it. You will get that sound. Done. That's it. Right there. How cheap was that? How easy was it? One of the most famous sounds in rock and metal, one of the most heavily sought after, was a piece of gear that people would laugh at a lot of players for knowing they were still using it. That should be a lesson to you. A band that was on tour with Metallica at the height of their popularity in the late 80s. Using a Pod Pro instead of all the big amps, he didn't need it to recreate all that stuff. You can get that sound directly out of it. And just to prove the point too, I did a quick one right here. Here's a sound clip for you. That sound is me. I got that through the Bass Pod Pro rack mount, black one. And I'm using a generic P-bass body copy, just cost next to nothing, with a jazz neck bolted into it. P&J setup, that was it. That directly into that thing. And I used that on an entire album and got asked a number of times how I got that sound. And people refused to believe that I was still using a pod unit. You can go back and get this stuff. Just because it's old doesn't mean it can't be killer. And that's what I would encourage you to do too, is not just like we talked about last time, mess around with things and try and come up with your tone in the new one. Go back because, one man's garbage is another man's treasure. You can pull sounds out of things that people would never expect, not because the item isn't capable of it, but it's because it's out of fashion and people have stopped experimenting with it. I do it on a regular basis, and there's nothing I love more than like grabbing an old PV head and bringing it in, something from Carvin, just anything I can get my hands on. If I see it around me, I have to plug into it and see what I can pull out of it. And sometimes something will have an old characteristic. And here's where the funny part is, and you can see it on channels like Glenn Fricker or any of the Gear Gods channel, stuff like this. All of a sudden, one of these guys will, figure this out. A great example, especially from PV2 for guitar players, the VTM heads. Brutal. Absolutely fantastic metal guitar heads. Especially, put a stomp box in front of it and you will crush things. Worked for Soundgarden. Worked for a number of other bands. But, you'll see them go and find one of these gems and then all of a sudden it shoots up in the used market. Whereas before people wouldn't look at it. It's because they just won't put the time in. Find joy in putting the time in. And that's really the key to all music and everything that's going to move you forward. Find the joy in screwing around with sounds. Just take a day and get a bunch of stuff in a room and go nuts. You never know what you're going to find, but you're not going to find anything if you don't look. With your playing, get a bunch of videos, get a bunch of books, get a bunch of instructional stuff, jump in the room with it, and just play. And sometimes you'll find a riff or a technique or something that just sets you on a new course. But put that time in. Don't be so distracted. Don't be a snob. Be ready to learn from everybody and be ready to learn about any piece of gear. You never know what's going to do it. I've got pieces all over my studio. Like I said, I'm going to show it one day when I go into the next series, which I'll talk about in a minute. And don't discount anything. You'd be surprised what can happen if you just open your mind a little bit, give something a shot. So now watch. Bass Pod Pros are all going to go through the ceiling because everybody wants the Queensryche sound, which, again, Mike Starr in the first Alice in Chains album, fantastic bass tone. Same approach. You can get the exact same sound out of it. So, have fun. Go grab one. Now, on the last note, I've been asked about my music, some things I've done. If you haven't checked it out or if you're interested or curious, my last CD from the project called Voice of Dissent is here on the channel. You can catch all the songs on it if you're interested in hearing it. But there is new music that's going to be coming, and it's going to be in conjunction with something else, and that's going to be a full video series. I'm going to give more details on it soon, but you're going to get an insight into so much about recording, production, songwriting, things like that, along with this new music. And I'm keeping it a little bit of a surprise, but probably the most in-depth thing on YouTube about metal production from top to bottom. As soon as I have everything laid out, probably within the next 1 or 2 episodes, I'm going to tell you what's coming up, and it's going to be a big undertaking, but I really think you'll all enjoy it. And if nothing else, it'll be some learning that I really hope will help you on your projects to run forward. So that's going to wrap up this Metal Bass Monday. The world's still in a bit of chaos, so I hope you and yours are healthy, happy, staying at home, jamming the heavy stuff, playing some great bass lines, putting together some videos that are going to blow me away. That's another one. I've seen some postings from guys that have actually been inspired by the channel, and that's been amazing to me. I love seeing that. And if you do come up with stuff, anything that has to do with what we've talked about on the channel, put it in the comments below, link it up. I always like seeing that stuff. And if you're doing something amazing or something, let me know. I can give a shout out, anything I can help. The last thing on that one would be, in the interest in getting the channel to grow and stuff, if you do want to help out, one of the best things you can do is just share the videos. When YouTube sees that, it pushes it up in the rankings and it lets more people see it. So if you can share, that's the best thing you can do for the channel, and I'd really greatly appreciate it. Right up there, thanks again to everybody who's working with me, who I haven't met quite yet or I have met through the lessons. You guys are awesome, and I'm really just having a great time working with you. Thank you so much for putting me in the honorable position of being your teacher. So I'll see you next week. Be safe, be healthy. Take care.